Hi everyone, welcome back to Alabama Care. I'm McCartney Hagar, and today we're going to be talking about airline accessibility and also the activist Engracia Figueroa. I think everyone with a disability has some awareness of the issues with TSA and sort of the protocol for people with disabilities. If you're not familiar, I'm just going to start with a little story about my own experiences. So, I've only flown once, and this was for shout out to the organization Magic Moments. They're like a wish granting organization. They do programs for people with disabilities and childhood illnesses. So, I received a trip from them. And so back in 2020, when we kind of thought the pandemic was ending back in the summer, I went on a trip to New York. And that sort of process of preparing, I'd heard a lot of activists talk about problems with airlines. We've had people say that their wheelchair batteries like exploded or something. The wheelchairs came back damaged, and it was really difficult to get them replaced. So, for me, being in New York with completely out of state, no access to anyone that could bring me a spare, if my wheelchair had been broken, then that would have been serious for me. I don't think, I mean, I have chronic pain, as a lot of people do with joint things, and I was kind of struggling as it was in my custom regular wheelchair. So I can only imagine if the worst had come and my wheelchair hadn't survived the journey. So, along with the possibility of my equipment being damaged, I was also kind of scared about the TSA like screening process. So, I'm gonna pull up this article, Clifton. It's the one from the Atlantic. It's the viral shame is what it starts with. So, yeah, I don't like the wording in this wheelchair bound. That's not something the disability community uses. However, I wasn't going to bring this article in until the end, but I remembered this was what I came across when I was researching what to expect from TSA. And if you scroll down, it's pretty alarming. We have these videos of children crying. Yeah, that. All these kinds of things, and it's not funny. But I was really shocked. So I was a little less excited for my life-changing trip. So that was a huge concern for me because I didn't know what I was getting myself into. So, we can go back to full screen. That's all I wanted to show for now. But I made it through. I was really lucky. I have to say, the process of getting on the plane using those weird little loaner wheelchair things that are like 6 inches wide it wasn't fun. And it was scary to have someone grab my wheelchair and roll me away from my family. Because, wheelchairs are so important. It's like an extension of your body. If someone like taps the back of it, even the handlebar, I can feel it. So to have someone I don't know come up behind me was really scary. But what I went through was very minor. I made it out fine. My wheelchair came back kind of wet and covered in weird rug fibers, but I made it. Other people, however, have not been so lucky. So we've had, let's see, let's pull up the first article. So here's the statistics on TSA and airlines in general. So they've lost or damaged more than 15,000 wheelchairs since late 2018. And I think if we scroll down, there's like a statistic. I think it was like 30 a day. Yeah. So, yeah, 29 a day. Thank you. So it's 29 wheelchairs, mobility devices, canes a day that are being lost. And people, okay, damaged, lost, delayed, or stolen. I did hear when I was researching for either for this or just like in general after the trip, I heard that someone they just gave a wheelchair to the wrong person. That I can't corroborate, but it was like it was just a Tumblr post, I think. But that was really surprising to me because wheelchairs are just so customizable. They're not interchangeable. So, hearing stories like this, I think anyone with a disability can kind of relate to having a device you rely on. Like if it had been your medication or your AAC, then it would have been a terrible situation. I mean, years for wheelchairs to get size for me, and we get it all planned out and approved for insurance. So I can only imagine what it would be like to actually completely lose or have it destroyed and not just wear out with old age. So the numbers did drop in 2020, but again, no one was flying. And I know this broadcast is coming at a bit of a strange time because this is not necessarily a hot button issue, being that nobody is flying, or at least I hope you're not, especially if you have a disability, please don't. But this is like the reason I'm bringing it up now is because recently we lost a disabled activist because her wheelchair was damaged. So we're gonna pull up a story about Engracia Figueroa. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. I'm pretty sure I am. So activist died after an airline damaged her wheelchair. So she fought for better conditions for people that work in people's homes, including like personal care attendants. The organization was hand in hand, yes. So this is a really great thing to see disabled people involved in because for me, like I rely on having someone come with me, like into my home and to help me with things. But the problem is it's really hard to keep people in these kinds of positions because they don't pay well. And sometimes people don't know what they're walking into. And I really hate that because I always like want to have a really good relationship and treat people in this situation like the people that are helping me well. So I'm really glad that there's sort of a mutual exchange of helping here because the disability community, we really rely on domestic workers. I wouldn't be able to get out of bed in the morning and go to school, and I wouldn't be here doing my job today if it wasn't because of, the programs that let me have someone work with me. So this woman was doing all she could to give back to the people that had helped her. And she also did disability activism. But she passed away this year, I think, or the end of last year. Yeah, would have been definitely 2021. So her United Airlines damaged her wheelchair, which costed $30,000. And I don't know, maybe some non-wheelchair users are pretty shocked in the audience, but that's about the going rate. I mean, the wheelchair costs more than the wheelchair van you have to get to lug it around. So, and again, wheelchairs are extremely customized. Every piece on my chair, if one thing is out of alignment, then I can be in pretty severe pain. We spend a lot of time in our chair, and especially she had a spinal cord injury, meaning she had less trunk support than I do. So I can only imagine the kind of pain that someone could be in if they didn't have proper support for that. And sure enough, she ended up getting a pressure sore, which got infected and ultimately led to an infection in her bones and her death. So all of this could have been avoided. Wheelchairs don't inherently get destroyed. It's not the wheelchair's fault. And here you can see some of the damage. We have a wheelchair. Looks like there's some cracking around like the fender and the wheel. And the armrest is completely gone. I don't know if the armrest, I don't see the armrest or the seat cushion. So yeah, and it's tilted back at an odd angle and it looks a bit twisted. So that's what her wheelchair came back looking like. And then in this picture you see off to the left, yes, to the left, she is in one of the wheelchairs I mentioned earlier. So for anyone who's never flown, these chairs, this seat cushion is probably 6 or 7 inches wide. It's not wide enough to support anyone's hips. You're going to get, like, I would get a pressure sore being in that for that long, because it will dig into your, like, your groin. So that would be extremely uncomfortable. And this is a horrible thing to have happen to anyone. She said, I woke up the next day in excruciating pain in my legs and ribs. My jaw also throbbed from clenching my teeth for so long. So after going through this, United Airlines wouldn't pay for her chair. It was like a fight. And by the time they had turned their decision around and actually decided they would compensate her or replace the chair, she had already passed away. And there's no telling how many times things like this have happened. The statistics show that this is happening a lot, and we don't know. This probably only went viral because she was an activist and people she knew media and knew her rights. So there's no telling how many people have had injuries or illnesses or even deaths as a result of things like this. So this is a quote I like from this article. So mobility devices are an extension of our bodies. When they're damaged or destroyed, we become redisabled. And that is from Engracia Figueroa. So and it's so true. I am not a fan. I'm very picky about people touching my chair. I can feel it. I always can feel it. So when someone is like, people will sit behind me in class and prop their feet up on me. And that, it's simple things like this. Non-disabled people just really aren't taught how to engage with us. And when you're in charge of handling someone's body, what they rely on to have freedom and be part of society, and you don't know how to deal with that, then it can lead to some really serious things. So aside from just the wheelchair aspect, there are other problems for people with all kinds of different disabilities. So we're going to go over to an article from NPR. And I was actually on NPR researching either another article or something for school, and I actually saw where they were wanted people to respond to this. So I almost did. I don't think I ended up having time. But I didn't really have like the harrowing experience some of these people had. But it was not great. I will say it was not great. I was scared. So we're going to go over just a couple other things that can happen at the airport, TSA, just the flying experience, and see in ways that this, discriminates, marginalizes disabled people, and prevents us from flying. But there will be kind of a silver lining at the end because things are improving. Also, just going to put in like a content warning. It's not really getting better from here. We've already been through some pretty serious topics with Engracia Figueroa, but, there have been other things that I'm going to talk about here. So, we're going to scroll down. And so here we have Heather Leiderman, who was blind, was told by a TSA agent to take off the harness on her service dog. And she could not do that because then the dog is just a dog. The dog thinks the workday is done and it's going to go like lick people's faces. So that means she's left without anyone to guide her, and the dog is a dog, not well behaved, not being in its training mode, running around the airport. So this is also very disempowering for people that rely on service animals. If you have built this bond with an animal and you trust each other to navigate things that are unfamiliar, then it's going to be extremely difficult I don't know if she had access to a weight cane at the time. I mean, that would be like if someone just said, okay, you have to leave the wheels of your wheelchair behind. You can't take the rest of it. So, and again, this is not required by TSA. This was like a mix up. So there's like a severe lack of training for people for agents to interact with people with disabilities. And I think that goes for like every business. So we have a college student here that says, stepping into an airport, I feel a sense of anxiety wash over me. Not about making my flight or finding my gate, but for my inevitable interaction with TSA that will leave me feeling dehumanized and criminalized because of my disability. So this is about what happened to me, I guess. Being separated from everyone, saying you have to get out of line and get a pat down even though nobody else is. It's unsettling and you don't really know why, and everyone's kind of staring at you wondering, like, is this a Breaking Bad scenario? Like, you really feel like you're, doing something wrong. So this person had implanted medical devices, a G-tube, things like that, and I believe he had to like dismantle everything to the best of his ability and had to pat down, like, trying to search for illicit things in the tubes. It was really dehumanizing and a total invasion of like privacy. And of course, we have the medical things not being taken care of. I think people with even very everyday things like diabetes supplies, people have had issues with that. They can't be x-rayed. So let's see. So NPR got 225 responses. I really should have responded to that. So we have wheelchairs broken in transit. Okay, so TSA has this thing, which I'll get to later. They have TSA Cares, which can help you find a guide that will walk you through this process, which is a great accessibility feature. I don't know if it's new because I feel like I would have found that when I was searching for myself. But yeah, that is actually a good resource to keep things like this from happening, but it can only go so far. So, and this is something that's an issue for people who don't have physical disabilities, don't have to worry about the mobility aid aspect, but children with autism being separated from their parents. So this is something I wanted to touch on. We've had problems with this during the pandemic as well. People with intellectual disabilities being separated from like the people they're trusting to help them communicate and like to explain things. And this is a huge disability issue. So everyone needs access to people they rely on to make everything like to make them comfortable so they can make the best decision possible. And it also kind of goes along with the supported decision making. It's important to be able to have access to that team that you trust when you're making like medical decisions or things of the like that could put you at risk. Sorry. Okay, so I'm gonna come to the comments here for just a second. So I won't be able to hear my computer. All right, so let's see. Yes, 29 a day is completely ridiculous. Okay, yes, I am going to Camp Aska. I will see you all there. Thank you, Joseph. I'm excited. So what are some tips that helped me have a positive experience traveling? Okay, so I would say I prepared myself the best I could, and I was still kind of blindsided. So I was told, or I read, that you can ask for your manual wheelchair to be stored in cabin storage, which that's what I wanted to do. I've heard people have the best experiences with that because there's no other heavy objects that can topple over on it, break it. There's a lot less handling that goes into it. But when I got there, I was kind of told that they didn't have cabin storage for wheelchairs. There was no like little closet thing, even though it folded up and the seat cushions were removable. So that wasn't great. But one thing that did help me is when I read about what's going to happen, even though it maybe freaked me out a little more than necessary, it was nice to know what was going to happen. So when, a stranger took me back to this little secluded area and nobody could see me or get to me, I wasn't as freaked out because I knew, the drill. And I think it's always important. Most of the reason I was researching was to know my rights, to know how everything's supposed to be conducted. That way, if something goes wrong, I know that it's not supposed to be that way, and I can report it and stand up for myself and make sure I can get whatever I need that didn't happen in the first place. So that was what really helped me the most. And I think I remember listening to an episode of The Accessible Stall. It's with Emily Ladau and Kyle Kachadorian or something. So they talked about this in a podcast, and I listened to that before I went. And I love listening to that podcast. It's like informative, but also pretty lighthearted. Normally, they try and go about these issues with a bit of humor, so it helps. So I highly recommend, reaching out, looking for other resources, staying like involved with the community and getting advice from other people. That's really the best to like know what you're going into and having that power. Right? So that's the comments we have so far. All right. So let's see. So we were kind of getting into our area of this. So I'm going to go back to the NPR article. And toward the end, it talks about what kind of legislation we have. And with disability, this was one of the last places that we were kind of had able to go. I remember, yeah, this is it. This is the section, the 1986 thing. So when 504 was being passed, we had, buses were still a frontier. And I remember reading Judy Heumann's biography, I think, and there was like a huge discussion about air travel and how there was so much fighting going on about no one wanted to get people in wheelchairs. It was just like the old excuse about a fire hazard or something. There was a lot of pushback. So, for people with disabilities, airline travel is regulated by an old, outdated law. So, this is kind of goes along. I think this was passed like when the ADA was passed, or like right shortly before the ADA. And I read over this law a little bit. It sounds good. You can click on it if you want to, Clifton. Like it sounds good, but it doesn't quite go into the detail. I would like, so there's still a lot. They can't refuse transportation. That's what it was. Okay, Judy Heumann was refused access to a flight, and she was like had this huge event going on. They physically took her off the plane. So this is what flying was like in the 70s and 80s, which is so recent. So yeah, about they can't refuse someone on grounds of the disability, and you don't have to tell them in advance, which is nice. I always worry about that when going to concerts. A lot of them will ask you to call in advance, and I wonder about that. We're not required to travel with another person, which is also nice because lots of people don't need help in these situations. And we can sit in any seat. So we have some accessibility things, which I really wonder about this. So all the planes I've been on, Okay, movable armrests, twin aisle. Yeah, I really don't know. So I'm reading this, and okay, new aircraft must have priority space for storing a passenger's folding wheelchair in the cabin. Okay, so it was not a really old plane I was on, so yeah, that was possibly not true. And there was no other wheelchair users on the flight because we were all like sitting together. So yeah, I feel like a lot of these guidelines aren't being followed. Um, sure. Okay, so must be more than 60 seats. Airplanes must space onboard wheelchair. Okay. So if you need access to a bathroom and there's no accessible bathroom, they will put an onboard wheelchair, but you have to have 48 hours notice. So there's a lot of things that have made it helpful and better since the 80s when they could literally just throw you off the plane. Not like with a parachute, but you know what I mean. um, but a lot of this is not. There's still a lot of holes in this that leave room for. I think my biggest issue is the weird airline chairs, because I really feel like they would be unsafe for a lot of people, and I'm concerned about that, along with all of the damaged wheelchairs. And obviously, the requirement on the storing it in the onboard little cabin thing is not being followed. So, if anyone has any more questions about this, I can kind of go through this more in depth. I'm kind of skimming to see if there's anything here that like they've worked on or that is supposed to be better than what is happening, but I'm not seeing a whole lot. Like I said, this law from the 80s, it sounds good on paper, but when you actually are there in person, you see there's a lot of holes. So yeah, they've updated this in 2015, but this is still the same law. So this is up to date as far as the law is concerned. They haven't changed it. But they did add, so I think at the bottom of the NPR article, they start talking about that they're required to report on these things now. So before, we don't know how many people were losing their wheelchairs. Like, we only have statistics from 2018 because there was no rule that they had to report when things were broken or damaged. So there's no telling. Like, imagine right when this law was first passed. So now that we're actually able to collect this data, we can make taking action so much easier. So people with disabilities are subject to inhumane treatment at every turn, says attorney Catherine McFarlane. And she talks about the rough pat downs, opening medications, standing. So yeah, we have disability rights lawyers who are still getting hassled on these flights. But there is this new law being put into place. There's like a FAA reauthorization. And I think if we scroll up on this, it actually explains it better than the actual FAA website I was on earlier. Just scroll down a little bit. So we're now reporting on, it's essentially just collecting data. We don't really know what that will look like in the next years, but I would certainly encourage everyone to keep their eyes open, keep their ears open, and if you can, if any state or area is voting on this, please vote for better airline accommodations. And I'm really, really hoping that this can be, if they're collecting data now, then we should be able to see results pretty soon. So I'm really looking forward to having less traumatic flights from now on. Let's see. Is there anything in the comments if anyone has any questions? So I'm just gonna give y'all a minute here. So this is nerve-wracking but exciting. Yeah, we have all kinds of horror stories here, but I think things will get better in the future. I've heard, I think with Engracia Figueroa's passing, we have, she fought for better accommodations, not just for people with disabilities, but the people that work for them. So I think that that really shows how much our community is trying to make it easier to include us, and yet this is how we're being responded to. So it's really hard when we have people that are really trying to do the best by everyone and still not getting, having these terrible things happen to them that are completely avoidable. So in the future, I'm really looking forward to seeing this change and seeing mobility devices, equipment, and just people treated with more respect. I didn't really start noticing until the past couple of years. Like, I never liked people touching my wheelchair, but I definitely wasn't aware. Like, I just thought it was normal. Like, I didn't like it, but I thought that was to be expected. So this is a great breakthrough that we're getting mainstream news sources reporting on, injustices facing the disability community, and also the importance of these mobility aids and just making sure the places aren't traumatic or deadly for people with disabilities, any kind of disability. So, thank you, everyone. I'm really happy to be back doing broadcasts again, and unfortunately, this one was not very happy, but it's something that's very important as a lot of people are attempting to return to normal. I think maybe Omicron isn't being taken very seriously. So, quick PSA, please remember that disabled and high risk people are still here. We can still get sick, we can still get hurt by this, and just because it's over for some people, it's not over for us. So, yeah, everyone, please be careful, be safe, and take care of other people. And please vote on everything because these things only happen when nobody pays attention and nobody knows what's going on. So, thank you all for doing the emotional labor of hanging out with me today. And I will be back next week, I believe, talking about some more not so fun things, but really important. And I also hope that this video can prepare everyone if you're planning to fly in the next few years. It's a daunting experience, but don't think that you can't do it. I don't put this out here to discourage anyone, just to be cautious, to know your rights, and to stand up for yourself. And bring supplies. I didn't have, you don't have a lot of room unless you want to check a bag, but I brought like this special blanket. It's really thick, and I used it as a leg prop, and it made a world of difference traveling. So there's no shame in trying to be as comfortable as possible, and we never know what situations we're going to get into. So thank you, everyone, and I will see you all next week.